Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon. I'm Dave Helman, and look, whatever your plans are for your Friday, for your weekend, whatever decisions you're going to make, whatever calls you're going to make, whatever you're going to get into, I hope it's more fun and ambitious and daring than what we saw from the Titans and Steelers coaching staffs on Thursday night. The Pittsburgh Steelers outlast the Tennessee Titans 20-16 in a game that was exactly the smash mouth slog I think a lot of us were expecting. Rookie quarterback Will Levis definitely impresses in his second NFL start, but it's Steelers linebacker Quan Alexander who picks him off in the end zone to snag a last-second win. Dying seconds of the game, Titans did have a chance to win another one with Will Levis under center, but as fun as the ending was, and it did come down to the final play, to be fair, NFL always finds a way to entertain me in the end, but the story of this game comes down to one of the more hilariously conservative fourth quarters that I've seen in a while from both teams. So I want to rewind to the 4-minute mark of the game. If you didn't watch, good. Honestly, I hope you were doing something fun on Thursday. Kenny Pickett leads an 11-play, 92-yard touchdown drive to take the lead, 20-16. Little over 4 minutes to play. Johnston actually caps it with a short touchdown catch, his first since the end of the 2021 season. I'm sure fantasy football players are well aware. It's the first quarterback Johnston's caught a touchdown from since Ben Roethlisberger. I love that stat. It's crazy. Okay. Titans start the next drive at midfield. Personal foul on the extra point by Pittsburgh allows for a long kickoff return. They got the ball right at the logo. Plenty of time. The world is their oyster. And here's what they do. They go end around on 1st and 10, 5 yards. Okay, that's cool. I like it. Maybe it has a chance to hit big. It's a little creative. 2nd and 5, Derrick Henry, left tackle, basically no gain against the solid Pittsburgh defense. 3rd and 4, a shotgun draw to Tyjae Spears, the rookie runner. 0 yards. They do go for it on 4th, but just keep in mind, so if you're keeping score, they didn't put the ball in their quarterback's hands at midfield one time with 3-something to play in a 4-point game. 4th and 4, they take a deep shot to Treylon Burks, who gets hurt attempting to make the catch. Important to note, Treylon was carted off after the injury. TV broadcast mentions he's got full movements in all of his extremities, hoping for the best for Treylon Burks. It was a really, really scary situation as he just misses coming down with a big, big catch. Point remains, one of the more conservative sequences I've seen, even for a team with a rookie quarterback. I mean, this is still the NFL. This is still a guy that was drafted in the top 40. Oh, by the way, threw 4 touchdowns the week before. Oh, by the way, was playing really well against Pittsburgh. Make no mistake, if I'm not doing a good enough job telling you, Will Levis threw for 262 yards in this game. The interception came at the very death, the last play, got sacked 4 times, got hit 16 times. Will Levis had some fantastic throws, some fantastic poise dealing with the Pittsburgh pass rush in this game. And Mike Vrabel, Tim Kelly, the offensive coordinator, whoever makes that decision, took the ball out of his hands in a crucial moment. Never you fret, because the Pittsburgh Steelers one-upped them. They take over at midfield. Steelers offensive coordinator Matt Canada tops that with 3 straight handoffs, one of which comes right before the 2-minute warning, and the other ones are followed by Tennessee timeouts that allow them to preserve all of the clock in the world. The way that these two teams were absolutely terrified of their coaching staffs, were terrified of their quarterbacks with a game on the line. I know they're young, but it was something to behold. I will give the Titans a little bit of credit. Will Levis does lead the Titans to the Pittsburgh red zone with a chance to win the game, but maybe I can see some of the rationale for the conservative play calling. He almost threw 2 interceptions on that drive and eventually threw one to Quan Alexander to seal the game. Even still, he was playing well enough to give you a shot. There was a similar sequence at the end of the first half. Tennessee drove to the Pittsburgh 18-yard line with 30 seconds until halftime. They had a timeout remaining. Will Levis, by the way, 4 of 6 on this drive, getting them to the red zone with 56 passing yards. 3rd and 10 with 30 seconds and a timeout. They call another draw to Tyjae Spears, a theme for the night. Just give up calls up the gut to the rookie running back. They call timeout with 3 seconds to play. They kick a field goal for a 13-10 lead. I understand that Will Levis got hit a lot in this game. I understand that TJ Watt and the Steelers pass rush is no joke. But I don't think you can win many games being that afraid to let your quarterback have the ball. I mean, he's got to throw it, and he's got to make some of those mistakes to grow as a player. Not sure how pretty it's looked in any game this season, but the Steelers get the win. They are 5-3. They are right in the thick of a loaded AFC playoff race. So as much as I might not enjoy watching most of their games, can't argue with the end results to this point. Titans, Will Levis is a fun player. I think not the way I would have called some of this, but at the very least, I'm very intrigued to watch this guy continue to play and grow. The arm strength speaks for itself, but even some of the arm angles, the release that he has is so fast. It enables him to throw into some really fun windows, to attempt some really fun throws. It's not all just deep shots either. Some of the things he was doing, layering balls in between levels of defenders, getting it over the linebackers, fitting it under the safeties. He was really, really impressive, even in a losing effort. But maybe we let the young quarterbacks continue to try to do that stuff. Just my 2 cents. Not that the coaching staffs are listening to me. All right, that wraps it up for Thursday Night Football. Best wishes to Treylon Burks. Want to make sure we say that one more time. On to week 9, and what a loaded slate it is. We've been talking about it all week. It's hard to even know where to begin, but of course we're going to begin with America's Game of the Week. It's a doozy. It's the first meeting between the Cowboys and the Eagles up at Lincoln Financial Field, Philadelphia in the fall. It's going to be brisk. It's going to be awesome. I'm so excited for it. We had a chance to talk with our guy, Greg Olsen, calling the game on Fox this weekend, getting into all things Eagles and Cowboys. We've got another segment, Eagles and Cowboys, talking about the brotherly shove as well. Stay tuned for all things Cowboys Eagles coming up next.
All right, Greg, it's an especially big one this week. Don't need to say a whole lot about it. Cowboys at Eagles. I wanted to get your perspective as a former player. I mean, it doesn't matter which rivalry, but every team plays a few games like this a year where, you've had it circled. The fans and the media are going to get more excited about it. Maybe the locker room's going to be a little more juiced than usual. How much harder is it as a player to block out the noise, to block out the anticipation when it's one of these marquee matchups like Cowboys Eagles?
Yeah, I think every coach, right, they preach all season long that, it's one game at a time, and every game we're going to treat the same. And I think that's true. I think the teams that try to get up for the big games and then have letdowns and they kind of ride that roller coaster of week in and week out in the NFL, I think those are the teams that struggle. I think with that being said, there's definitely a renewed energy. There's definitely a different sense around the building. There's more people around. There's more every time you turn the TV on, the game's the commercial, the game's the highlight. I think the advantage that these two teams have is that this is not new to them, right? They know every time they play twice a year, it's the game of the week. It's the primetime game. It's America's Game of the Week or whatever it is. This is not new to them. These are teams that are playoff teams, the last couple of years. Philly just played all the way through to the Super Bowl. So I think playing in games that feel elevated from a typical regular season game, I don't think is anything new to a lot of these players or coaches. So I don't necessarily think it's a huge factor for either one of these teams. I think obviously there's a lot can be made as far as the division race and playoff seedings and all that, but roughly at the halfway point, there's still so much left in the season. I think you have to be careful making the games more than they are.
I want to start with the Eagles side of this. I feel guilty. I've talked to you about the Eagles a handful of times this year, and obviously they come up a lot. Every time I'm talking about the Eagles, I feel like I'm focused on how much better they could be. And I mean, I still think that's true, but at the end of the day, you have the best record in the NFL. You got arguably the best receiver in the NFL. I mean, there's a lot to feel good about with this team. I'm curious, when you watch them, what is the one thing that you think the Eagles are doing most impressively right now?
Yeah, I mean, most impressively is their passing offense. I think especially the last couple of weeks. I mean, just look back what Jalen Hurts was able to do. I think the run that, just last week against Washington, the run that A.J. Brown is on, no player ever has been on such a good run as far as 6 games, over 125 yards or whatever the specifics are. So I think their development as a passing offense that now has the ability when they have the lead to lean on that big offensive line in the run game and kind of run games out at the end and wear you down. But I think that they're going to pass to get the lead. I think so much has been made about their running attack and all that over the years. And that's true. But this year, we have not seen Jalen Hurts be used pretty much at all as a designed runner. Obviously, now he's got the knee brace and, has some level of knee injury that he's been dealing with for a couple of weeks. So that's really hindered, their willingness to turn him into a runner. He'll have a scramble play here and there to keep a play alive, but it's not the foundation of the offense like it was, a couple of years ago. So I think their development as a true passing game, weapons, offensive line protection, the play of Jalen Hurts, it's a big challenge for Dallas this week to defend this passing game of Philly. And I don't know if 2 years ago we would have said that.
I think that's a great point. And I'm curious, like when you go into a matchup like this, a lot of times I feel like defenses want to answer with physicality, whether that's trying to out physical a receiver or throwing off the timing of the offense. But A.J. Brown is such a physical player. I mean, is it a mistake to try to do that? Or how would you try to limit A.J. Brown if that's even possible?
Well, that's the question. I think the interesting thing when you dive into the numbers and you really dive into the film, the thing that's really struck me going back is seeing how teams have come into the game deciding to play Philly. They still play them with a lot of heavy boxes. They still play them on first and second down, like they have to stop the run at all costs. And then you wonder, you look at the box score and Jalen Hurts throws for over 300 and A.J. Brown's got 150 and 2 touchdowns. And everyone goes, wow, they're so good. They're going to get their yards in the passing game. A.J. Brown, you're going to have him covered and he's going to big body you. He's going to contested catch. He's going to take a slant and hit a seam and he's going to make his plays. So will Devontae Smith. So will Goddard, right? They have a lot of weapons, but you can't make it easy on them. I don't necessarily think the plan coming in is for any team, not just Dallas, is first and second down. I need to have a 7 or 8 man box based on the personnel, and we are not going to let them run the ball. I'm not really worried about them running the ball on me on first and second down. If they want to chip away, I'm willing to play that game if I'm an opposing defense. What I can't let them do is let them throw the ball over my head. I can't let them get explosives, chunk plays, 40, 50-yard bombs to Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. That's why they've been such a handful and so hard for teams to beat when they have, a competitive game, is they can't limit the explosives. If you want to keep this a low possession game and you want to let them go the length of the field, you get a few red zone stops, maybe a turnover mixed in there. All of a sudden now, instead of them being in the 30s, now all of a sudden you're only chasing a low 20s game. That's a significant difference. And I just don't quite understand why teams continue to play them, maybe how you would have played them a year or two ago.
I do want to touch on that. I think I looked this up last night. I think these are the top 2 teams in the NFL in 10 plus play drives, which I don't think is not particularly surprising, but it's going to be interesting to see who can disrupt that more, I suppose. You mentioned turnovers with Philly. I don't think it's fair to blame Jalen Hurts for all of this the same way it wasn't fair to blame Dak Prescott last year, but 11 turnovers halfway through the season is still a marked increase from last year. When you watch it, is this decision making? Is it bad luck? Is it miscommunication? What would you say has led to some of these?
Yeah, I think the answer is everything. I think anytime you have a rash of turnover worthy plays, whether they actually result in a turnover or not, I think the big stat you want to look at is percentage of plays that are turnover worthy plays, right? Just because a guy drops a pick, it hits him in the chest, it doesn't go down, but it's still a play that you want to try to eliminate. So I think that turnover worthy plays is a really interesting metric. And I think anytime there's a rash of that or anytime there's an increase compared to years past, I think it's a combination of everything. I think sometimes it could be just a bad break, right? A couple bad bounces, a couple tip balls, missed assignment, wrong route. Could be pass protection breakdown. Obviously, Philly's offensive line is really good. So obviously they don't have a ton of those. But I think anytime there's always a shared blame. Of course, the quarterback is always going to be in the crosshairs. You mentioned Dak. That was kind of the storyline coming out of last year with the Cowboys. But I think it's a shared responsibility. Protecting the ball and taking the ball away is the key to every single team. It's the key to winning in the NFL. You look back at these two matchups last year, even though Dak and Jalen weren't necessarily playing against each other. Minshew started one, Cooper Rush started one. But the point being, when Dallas lost game one, the matchup last year, they had 3 turnovers. When Philly on Christmas Eve, we called that game, when they lost to Dallas on the road in Dallas, they had 4 turnovers. Granted, it wasn't Jalen Hurts. But the point standing is turnovers are always the key to these matchups. This week, even more so.
It's not every week when we get to talk, Greg, that you're doing the same, you're calling the same team twice in a row. That's the case here. Had the Cowboys-Rams game last week, and I remember we talked about them trying to open up their passing attack. Lo and behold, they did it. Their first 300-yard game of the season, 4 passing touchdowns. I'm curious, watching it live and then rewatching it, getting ready for this game, what did you see that enabled that breakout against LA?
Yeah, I think like we talked about last week, Dak had been having a good season. Turnovers were down, completion percentages were up, but it was really at the expense of attacking down the field, generating explosive plays, something that they had really excelled at over the last couple of seasons under Kellen Moore. And now I think under Mike McCarthy, they were still trying to figure out what is that balance between being a downfield passing attack, but also being a little bit more conservative, keeping the defense fresh, keeping more sustained drives, and all of those boxes they've checked all season. The difference last week versus the Rams was the big plays down the field, the chunk plays to CeeDee Lamb, the chunk plays, getting Brandon Cooks involved. Their ability to be a little bit more explosive and dynamic in the passing game as opposed to just death by 1,000 paper cuts. Look, they still had some real long drives. That first possession of the third quarter, the Rams went down and scored to cut it to 16. They got the ball back, and they had the ball, I think, for like 17 plays or like something crazy. And they went down, kicked the field goal, made it 19, and the game was over. So they still had the ability to sustain because they're so good on third down, but it was the explosive plays. It was throwing the ball over your head from the 30-yard line as opposed to having to score everything from inside to 5 like they've had in the past games. In the red zone had really, red zone offense still continues to be a little bit of a struggle. So it was Dak's best game by far. That version of Dak is probably as good a quarterback as there is in the league. And if they can get that week in and week out, that's a different animal now. That's a really good team when their passing attack is able to operate like that.
Speaking of week in and week out, I'm curious. It's an amazing matchup for a lot of reasons, but this Eagles secondary, they were so good a couple weeks ago against Miami, and then we kind of see them revert back to their old ways, giving up a ton of yardage to Washington last week. Where do you see that matchup? I mean, is that success that the Cowboys had against the Rams, can they replicate that against this secondary, do you think?
I think that's the $1 million question, right? I think this Eagles defense is still trying to kind of find its way, which sounds funny for a team that has the best record in the league and sits here at roughly the halfway point, sitting atop not only the conference but the best record in the NFL. So but I think they're still kind of adjusting the Sean Desai scheme, little tweaks, little differences. Obviously, Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, moved on to be the head coach in Arizona. So they've got some new pieces back there. They're still trying to figure out how that all works, but their rush needs to carry them. They need to be able to play light boxes. They need their front to control the game, and they need to keep as many guys in coverage and keep the integrity of that back end in place as many times as possible. I don't think they need to be overly aggressive stacking the box. I don't think they need to be overly aggressive bringing a lot of second level pressures. I think the more coverage players intact, the better. And just say, hey, my front, I've got 5 real. When they go that 5 down and they got their 5 top guys in there with Sweat and Hassan Reddick on the outside, Fletcher Cox, and then obviously Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. I mean, that's a 5. That's a nightmare if you got to block those guys. So I think that's got to be their pressure activation with the front and try to play pass defense. And if the Cowboys decide they want to run the ball, we've been the best run defense all year. We'll take our chances stopping it with our front.
I can't stop thinking about how excited I am to see Jalen Carter go against Tyler Smith, the second-year guard in Dallas. So I'll leave you with this. This is one of those games where, I mean, gosh, there's a Pro Bowler on Pro Bowler type of matchup all over the field on both sides of the ball. Which one excites you most when you think about getting to call this game on Sunday?
Man, the thing that jumps out, you're so right. The thing that jumps out about this game is that there's just stars all over the place, right? There is just star players on both sides of the ball, skill players in the trenches, up front. This is as good of a combined roster as maybe any combination of teams, that could play each other in the league, and let alone to be division rivals in a place like Philly. I mean, it has all the ingredients to feel like a playoff environment, which is going to be awesome. I think the Micah Parsons, he's yet to record a full sack in his career. He has half a sack in his career against the Eagles. So, can they find a matchup? Obviously, the Eagles are really good at tackle. They're really good at center. Can they find some matchups on the interior? Do they have to do some overloads? How does Dan Quinn unleash Micah Parsons to have the production we're accustomed to seeing him have that he hasn't quite had in the handful of matchups in his early career here now against Philadelphia? I think that's one of the matchups I'm anxious to see.
It's going to be awesome any way you slice it. This is why you do it. I mean, they're all good, but this is about as good as regular season football gets, I think. So, Greg, I appreciate the time. I hope it delivers on the promise this weekend, my man.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, guys.
What's that? You thought we were done with Cowboys Eagles? Not just quite yet. It is America's game of the week after all. It is the NFC East. It's one of the biggest matchups of the regular season so far. We want to make sure we do it right for a game with as many eyes on it as this one. So we have a separate piece for you. We want to take a deep dive, a thorough look at one of the key elements of this Eagles team, and therefore, I think, one of the key elements of this game. You guessed it. It's the brotherly shove. I'm not calling it anything else. That's what we call it on this show. I had a chance to talk to our own NFC East writer, Eagles expert Ralph Vacchiano. We also had Fox gambling analyst, co-host of the Bear Bets podcast, Geoff Schwartz, had a nice little dialogue about the rugby play that's taking the NFL by storm this season. Check it out.
All right, guys, this felt like a perfect week to do this. I mean, at this point, we're halfway through the 2023 season. We know all about the brotherly shove, the tush push, the rugby play, the Eagles, fourth and short, whatever you want to call it. We are up to speed on it, but it feels like a good week to talk about it. Eagles and Cowboys at Lincoln Financial Field on Sunday. It's going to be America's game of the week. It's going to be seen by God knows how many people. And I just feel kind of confident that it's going to be a talking point no matter what happens after the game. So I wanted to bring in you two guys who I think can help us expound on the topic. Ralph, I want to start with you. Interesting wrinkle to the lore of this play on Sunday. The Eagles beat the Commanders 38-31, and the brotherly shove was a big talking point once again, not just because they failed rarely. I think it's just the fourth time they've failed doing it all season, but also because they modified it. They turned it into a completely different play. I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through what you saw in that win against the Commanders.
Yeah, well, first of all, they've modified it a couple of times this season. I don't think I saw that at all last year when I looked back at it. But this year they did come out a couple of times in slightly altered formations, and a couple of times where, or at least once I can recall, where they ended up running wide on it instead of running right down the middle. It's not the wisest idea when you're that good at a play. I don't know why you would necessarily decide to change up, but I think from the Eagles' perspective, they think that with all this focus of attention on it, people are trying to figure out ways to stop it. So they're trying to keep the defense off balance a little bit. But when push comes to shove, no pun intended, they know how good that play is. They know. I
think you intended that pun a little bit. I think you intended that pun a little bit.
I may have intended that pun, yes. But they know how good it is. They know how powerful that play is. It's going to succeed more than 90% of the time. So if they want to rely on it, they will, and it will work. And if it does, if they try it on 3rd and 1 and it doesn't work, chances are it's going to work on 4th and 1. So, why would you go away from it? I think it failed against Washington because, well, look what they're running up against. Right? They're running into Jerron Payne and Jonathan Allen in a pretty good defensive front. That's the way to stop it, because it's really, when you boil down to it, and I'm sure Geoff can break this down much more than I can, but to me, it's always just looked like strength against strength. And if you've got the strength to push back and stop it, you may win. In most cases, that Eagles middle of their line and a powerful quarterback, they're going to win.
which you alluded to it perfectly. We are joined by Geoff Schwartz, former NFL offensive lineman, a guy who might know a thing or two about this. Geoff, is it as easy as saying Jason Kelce, Landon Dickerson are just better at leveraging and pushing than anybody else in the NFL? Because we know other teams aren't doing it as well as the Eagles.
It does start with Kelce, right? His ability to get low, and you see him when he's doing it, he's kind of he's like, crabbing down there, right? He's just like low, because the way to stop this, to go to the end of this discussion, is you have to cut the legs of the offensive linemen so they fall straight down, and then you have to jump over the top as linebackers and hammer the quarterback. And one way to stop it, by the way, is unfortunately what happened to Purdy, right? If you hit a quarterback up high and they start getting hurt a little bit, this ends the play, right? Now that was a normal sneak, not a tush push. The other part of this that I think is not talked about enough is Jalen Hurts waits about half a second before he goes forward. It's a big difference compared to a lot of other guys that do this. A lot of other guys just try to snap and go, right? He snaps and he waits that split second for his lineman to get a little bit of push, and then he rides the backs of them over top, right? So he's not getting the brunt of that initial contact, and then he's sort of finding that crease typically between, as you mentioned, the left guard and the center. But that split second of wait time, I think, really allows it to sort of happen, and then he's able to use his strength, because he is a strong football player, to use his legs to push him over the top. If you go right now, then you almost negate your legs because you're on top of linemen too fast. So I think that ability for him to sort of wait that split second and have the patience to know that his guys are gonna execute really helps this play work.
That is a really fascinating point that I hadn't considered. I mean, everybody that follows the NFL at this point knows that Jalen can squat 600 pounds. We've heard that. But I think that's the interesting point is, I mean, we've seen plenty big, plenty athletic quarterbacks not generate as much push. So what you're saying is almost like a running back, like having the patience to let those blocks develop is equally as big of a part of it.
Yes, if you just watch next time. It's like a tick. He waits a tick before he decides to go. And again, it's over the left guard, as we mentioned many times beforehand. But it allows him to get his strength before he runs and kind of load his body up. But two, if it doesn't work quite with the left guard, he can kind of bounce to the left guard, left tackle. He can go to the right. He's not beholden to one part of the line. And then I think a lot of times in the ones the quarterback seeks that fail, it's when guys and quarterbacks just basically close their eyes. They take the snap and they just go right now to whatever hole they predetermine is going to be there. And Hurts doesn't do that. He treats it like a running back. And that's an important part of this. The squat thing is so funny to me because he never really uses his legs to drive the pile forward. He's on top of the lineman and they're pushing him. So the idea that his squat number is the reason why this works to me is not at all valid. I think it's worked because his technique is really good. He uses good technique. I mean, Tom Brady for years was great because he did the same thing. He was able to read the defense. He went a little quicker, but he knew exactly where to go. I mean, they often did it in times when you didn't think they were going to do it. Did it in quick count and whatnot. It's the technique of the way he does it more than I think his 600-pound squat.
I think the answer to that is never underestimate the power of a viral video. I think, Jalen just putting some racks on the bar in the weight room will do wonders for public perception. Yes. But Ralph, that raises an interesting point. And I'm not trying to question Jalen Hurts' toughness, but he's clearly dealing with something with his knee. Like you see it. I know he's not on the injury report. Nick Sirianni has said that he's fine, but you can see a difference in the way he plays. Did you see a difference when they were executing the brotherly shove against the Commanders, or do you think that can hinder the way they run this play moving forward?
That's a good question. I don't know that I noticed specifically the play against the Commanders, having anything to do with his knee. I can see where it could, if only that, Geoff's, I'm sure, right, that the squatting and the leg push aren't as big a factor as the offensive line and the push from behind. But, he does have to move a little bit and move relatively quickly into the right gap. And it looks to me to be a generally dangerous play. It's a pile of, 22 people all trying to stop, or 11 of them trying to stop him and others trying to push him from behind. If he is dealing with something, I might think twice if I were the Eagles about putting him in that situation if it really could bother him. So I could definitely see it being a factor going forward. But so far, I can't say I've looked at the tush push and thought, man, he looks really gimpy. That's not going to work, because again, most of the time it's worked.
It's true. I guess I wonder if that the knee is compromised, and even if you're not like driving off of it, putting your quarterback into a scrum like that when his knee might not be at full health, I wonder if they have second thoughts. But at the same time, it's such a crucial part of their identity. I mean, I don't think you can underrate it.
What's the difference between him scrambling on 3rd and 8 versus the tush push with his knee? To me, it's all the same. I never, Chiefs fans, whenever I tweet out that they need to just run a quarterback, well, Mahomes hurt his knee. I'm like, but they run him on speed option. Like they run him like in playoff games all the time. What's the problem with doing quarterback sneak? To me, that should not matter. In fact, I would argue that just moving straight forward in a line on a tush push with help from your teammates is easier in your knee than 3rd and 8 trying to get away from the Cowboys pass rush this weekend.
Jeff, obviously this play has taken the league by storm over the last couple of years, but nothing new, nothing in football is truly new. Like in your experience playing, did you ever run anything at least similar to this? Or even if you didn't, just doing regular sneaks and stuff? I mean, what type of toll do those type of plays take on an offensive lineman?
We didn't do it very often. I played with Eli at the end of my career. Eli ran 0 quarterback sneaks, I think, his entire career. I can't imagine he even ran one. Beginning of my career was Jake Delhomme. He didn't run any quarterback sneaks. Alex Smith, we was mobile. We were in gun running RPO stuff on 3rd down. We didn't have to get him under center. Throughout my career, mostly it was Tom Brady. He was the only one doing it. He was just the guy that always ran the sneaks. No one else would do it. Every time I watch Kelsey do it, I feel bad. Like he's not a big fella for an offensive lineman. And he just looks pained. Like it looks painful every time he's doing it. He's down there at the bottom of a pile, like I mentioned, sort of like crab walking to try to clear some space for his quarterback. And he's not big. And so I imagine it takes a toll, but in the end, when it works, it pays off, right? If it ends up getting you victories, you continue to do it. And also too, look, let's be fair, if it hurt Kelsey or hurt Dickerson or hurt anyone else, they wouldn't run it, right? It would be taken out if it was really painful for the guys. But it's a scrum, man. I mean, it's like rugby football, right? You're getting down, getting low, and trying to root out a guy in front of you.
You did mention, and we saw it from the 49ers, Fred Warner went right over that pile. Is that, is it realistic to think that a defense can do that consistently enough to stop the Eagles from doing it? And I can't help but notice the Dallas Cowboys employ a particularly athletic linebacker by the name of Micah Parsons. Maybe we could see them throw some kind of wrinkle at this on Sunday.
So that's why they put in that reverse or whatever the spin out thing they did, hand off to Smith, right? Is like, this is the exact thing, because if you're going to try to throw your linebackers over the top, well, you have less defenders to go to get someone on the edge. Like that's why they threw this wrinkle in. Is now I'm sure they're going to have, Parsons, okay, you're on the quarterback. Someone else now has to account for the wide receiver running out, to the edge, and that's one less player that can account for Jalen Hurts. So that's why they put this in, was to be able to have defenses think a little bit and maybe not react as fast. But and again, with Hurts, as I mentioned, waiting that split second, he avoids sort of that initial contact, right? And the way he's able to sort of duck in behind his line and the guys push him over the top, he seems to avoid a lot of that contact. The thing with Purdy was sort of a perfect storm because he got held up. If quarterbacks get held up on the sneak, that's when those linebackers can come in. I'm not, again, advocating for anyone to hit someone in the head, but that's what happens, right? Like when you're upright in that sneak, you get hit in the head. When you're like Hurts is down, right? He's tucked in a ball. He's not going to get hit in the head very often. So it's hard to do that unless you're able to get lower than Kelsey. And I just love when the camera zooms in and they're literally like face to face. The hand, they've been called for offsides twice when it's actually the other team's hand like in the way or Kelsey's hands down. It's just old school football. It's just a big scrum. So there's a lot they can do off of it. It's play action pass they can do off of it. There's a lot of options that they haven't shown yet. And they can come in a big moment of a game.
Geoff, I don't want to speak for you. You're kind of talking about it with admiration in your voice. Like, would you be bummed as an O-lineman to see this play go away?
Why would they? Like, what are they going to ban it? What's the rule that's going to ban it? You can't.
I'm with you. Basically, I think people are just annoyed that the Eagles do it too well.
Sure.
That's all I got.
But what I mean, like, are you gonna say no more pushing of teammates? That means if a running back is being held up by a linebacker, I can't come and hit the running back. I can't like try to move him. Wide receiver, same thing. I have to stand there like, sorry, I can't. That's the rule now. I can't touch him. Like, I don't. What's the rule going to be? No tush push? Like, that seems silly to me. They're not going to do that for one specific play. My thing is like the way you stop it is you don't put the Eagles in 4th and 1. Right? You're better on 3rd down. Like that's what you have to do against them, and you have to account for that, right? I mean, on 3rd and 4, they're more likely to run the football because they're going to go for it on 4th and 1, right? So you have to account for that on defense, and so I don't think it should be banned. And you have to find other ways to stop it, or again, be better on 1st and 2nd down. So 4th down ends up being shorter.
And Geoff makes a great point that this is there's more pushing going on in the NFL than just on quarterback sneaks, and pushing a player for a little bit extra is not new at all. And I know that it was banned for a while, and it was obvious that you would get flagged for it. You couldn't carry a player and all that. But the people who are criticize this and say, well, it's not a football play. To me, it just seems like one of the ultimate football plays. It's just, again, I understand there's a lot of technique, but it's the strength. And you see a guy, he needs that extra yard. You go in and you hit him a little bit, you push him a little bit, and you get that extra, you do whatever it takes to get there. And I think in football, we've seen it all over the field. And certainly you see defenders doing it. If a defensive lineman is holding up the quarterback, but he's starting to go backwards, you're going to see linebackers pounding into his back, trying to push the other way. So that to me is exactly what football is. I don't understand, other than the fact that the Eagles are so good at it, I don't understand why so many people are against it.
Whatever argument that people had for banning it, I think went out the window when everybody started trying to run it, and they're terrible at it. Right. I mean, we watch a lot of football, and I know it's worked for other teams, but I think at last check, the Eagles are converting 92% of the time when they do this, like 41 out of 45 attempts. So until you can match that production, I say just get better at stopping it, which the other side of this is somebody's going to find something for this. That's the way the NFL works. It might take a little while longer, but I'm confident we're going to see somebody come up with a fun counter to it. I can't wait to see it. Guys, I appreciate the time. This was fun. Hopefully the next iteration of the brotherly shove against Dallas is equally as fun. Thanks a lot.
Anytime.
Way before the birds and the boys get after it, we've got some morning football on a Sunday. Week 9 brings us our first Germany football game. The Chiefs and the Dolphins kicking off from Frankfurt Stadium. It's the home of Eintracht Frankfurt, currently sitting 7th in the Bundesliga table. Come for the American football, stay for some German soccer updates. All right, I'm sorry, because this is clearly a big one. It's the dynasty, or the closest thing to it in the current NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs, and we're gonna call this the "Are the Dolphins Legit Bowl?" I don't necessarily think it's fair, but that's where we are. The Miami Dolphins are 6-2. They're on top of their division. They have the best offense in football. We can comfortably say right now that they are very, very likely a playoff team. But they happen to have a minus 42 point differential when they go up against fellow playoff contenders. The Buffalo Bills beat them by 28 about a month ago. They got another shot to prove themselves against Philadelphia a couple weeks ago. They fell well short. They lost by 14. Regardless of the reality, because again, this is a playoff team. Maybe that'll age poorly, but I really don't think so, barring some sort of terrible injury, knock on some wood. This is a good team, but regardless of that reality, the noise is only going to get louder if the Dolphins can't beat or at least threaten the Chiefs this weekend. This is about as vulnerable as the Kansas City Chiefs have looked since Patrick Mahomes became the starter. So, Dolphins, I'm not even asking you to win the game, honestly. If you can't at least push them, the narrative is going to be that you're not for real. You're not worth taking seriously. Cool. We'll see you in the playoffs, and we'll see you out of the playoffs very shortly after that. Again, is it fair? Probably not. Is that the way we work in this take-based economy? Absolutely. It's funny to think how much more sense this matchup would have made a year ago if you think about it. Turns out it came a year later. Yes, the Chiefs won a Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill. Nobody's taking that away from them. But this looks like what a lot of people expected the Chiefs to be when they traded him away. Tyreek Hill, 25 games since the Chiefs traded him to Miami, 2,700 receiving yards, 15 touchdowns. He's averaging 7 catches for 110 yards per game over a season and a half in Miami. It makes sense that the Chiefs are struggling without him. Kudos to them for figuring it out last year. But if you want to call it the bill coming due, if you just want to call it investments in replacements not working out, I think that's the more realistic thing. It is what it is. Tyreek Hill is an NFL Offensive Player of the Year favorite. He is at least in the MVP conversation. It's already at 1,000 yards, eight weeks through the season. I don't know what else you can say about him. For the Chiefs, the challenge continues of finding somebody in 2023. All right, so we can stop hand-wringing about it. It is an issue, but the Chiefs are still 6-2. Their loss to Denver broke a 6-game winning streak. Like, they're going to be okay, I think. But it is interesting to think this is what they have moving forward. The trade deadline has come and gone. A lot of people speculated that they might go after a receiver. Maybe New England will send you Juju Smith-Schuster back into the fold like you did already with Mecole Hardman. Didn't happen. So this is the group the Chiefs have. I'm curious about one in particular. Only one Chiefs receiver so far this season has caught 20 or more passes, and that would be Rashee Rice, the rookie out of SMU. I think that's the guy that you look to if you're Kansas City to try to establish some consistency. Because really, again, I understand why Patrick Mahomes is having trust issues. He's had 15 drop passes this season. That's the 4th most in the NFL. Chiefs have had multiple drops in 6 of their 8 games. 3 of those came against Denver. It's been a problem every single week. But the good news, Rashee Rice, though young, seems to be a player to me. He has 30 catches on 40 targets this season. And over the last 3 weeks, he's getting targeted 21% of the time he runs a route. He does have 4 drops on the season. Remember, he had an up and down debut against Detroit, the game that they eventually lost without Travis Kelce. He's only got 1 drop in the last month. So maybe the consistency is coming. Maybe this young cat is a guy that Patrick Mahomes can turn to. I will say this. The problem for the Chiefs is this is an 11 personnel team. This is a team that likes to have 3 wide receivers on the field. They use that personnel group 62% of the time. So who are your other 2 guys? Cool. We got Travis Kelce. He's going to be on the field. Maybe we like Rashee Rice. Kadarius Toney, he helped them win a Super Bowl, but the trade just hasn't carried forward into 2023. 109 receiving yards so far this season. He's only been targeted twice in the last 2 weeks. MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, looked like a breakout moment against the Chargers, followed that up with a fumble in Denver. And I know Chiefs fans are frustrated with Sky Moore, the second-year receiver, on the weekly. We'll see if Mecole Hardman can pick up some snaps. He also had a fumble in Denver. The more I talk about it, the more I think this was just a perfect storm of things going wrong for the Chiefs against the Broncos. I don't think the sky is falling. I do think they still have Patrick Mahomes, but this is still an offense that's trying to figure things out. It's looked really good in 2 games and very up and down in the other 6. And now you've got the most explosive offense, your former star receiver doing his thing over there, and this Dolphins team looking healthier. Remember, the Dolphins were severely hampered by injury in that game against Philadelphia. We don't want to make excuses, but I think that's just a fact. Can't say this too sure. It's too early in the week, but things are trending in the right direction for Miami. It looks like left tackle Teron Armstead will play in this game. It looks like center Connor Williams will play in this game. It's cornerback Xavier Howard looking likely to play in this game, and Jalen Ramsey is back from his knee injury he played last week against New England. So that's both of your top 2 corners, 2 of your injured offensive linemen. So this could be as close to the ideal version of the Miami Dolphins as you could ask for. I know Devon Achane is still on injured reserve. Raheem Mostert limited by an injury, but if the offensive line's looking better and the secondary has good cornerbacks, I think you'll take those problems. So Miami Dolphins, I don't know what excuse to come up with. This is probably as much as you can ask for against a caliber of opponent like this. The matchup that I'm going to watch, I laid it all out for you. If I wanted to geek out, I would point out that Nick Bolton is now missing from the Chiefs defense with a wrist injury, and the Dolphins, for all we talk about Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, we know the Dolphins can run the hell out of the ball. I think that's something to watch. But how do you go against the matchup of Tyreek Hill, who used to be a Chief, one of the best Chiefs of the Andy Reid era, And, oh, by the way, he's on pace to rewrite basically the entire receiver record book in a single season. How the Chiefs deal with him, their defense has been very good this season. It's been the strength of the team, if we're being honest, other than Patrick Mahomes still being the best quarterback alive. But in terms of units, Chiefs defense has been the more consistently good side of that team basically all season long. How do they handle Tyreek Hill? If they handle Tyreek Hill, can they handle Jalen Waddle? That's always going to be the storyline with the Dolphins. This doesn't have to be it for Miami. I know it's still halfway through the season, but you would at least like to see a challenge. You would like to see the Dolphins in it to the end, preferably winning this game. It's something that's eluded them all of this season and at times last season as well, particularly down the stretch. Like I said, might not be fair, but this is going to say a lot about the narrative of the Dolphins, because even with all their struggles, we trust that the Chiefs will be there in January and even possibly into February. Can't say the same for Miami, but a game like this could go a long way toward changing people's minds. Sunday starts with a huge matchup in the AFC. It also ends with a huge matchup in the AFC. The nightcap is the Buffalo Bills heading to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. The headline here should be fairly obvious. I don't think you can even think about Bills Bengals without mentioning Damar Hamlin, the Bills safety who collapsed mid-game in Cincinnati last January. Miraculous story, miraculous survival and recovery. Tremendous effort by the Buffalo Bills athletic training staff, tremendous efforts by the University of Cincinnati doctors and hospital. Obviously a story that captivated the country, even the world. And it's remarkable to think how smoothly Damar Hamlin's recovery has gone. Hamlin's smooth recovery and everything that's come after that episode makes it easy to lose track of the fact that it only happened 10 months ago, almost to the day. He returned to the team in the spring. He was part of the offseason program. He participated in training camp. He played in the preseason. It's all gone according to plan, to the point that Damar Hamlin is on the Buffalo Bills. Remember, he was a reserve heading into last season. He got a lot of extra playing time because of injuries. Buffalo Bills haven't needed to call much on Damar Hamlin this season. He's been a healthy scratch in 7 of 8 games, primarily playing on special teams. Now it comes full circle. I think it's interesting to note, Bills head coach Sean McDermott, he's already stated that Hamlin's participation in this game will be decided by football, whether or not they need him to be up or down. It's not going to be an emotional decision, but the emotions of this game are going to be very, very real. You've already seen Damar talk about it. You've seen his Bills teammates talk about it. That was something that made an indelible impact on this team at the time and will continue to, especially when you go to Cincinnati where it all occurred. So regardless of what role Damar Hamlin plays in the game, whether or not he plays at all, it's going to be an emotional night for him. It's going to be an emotional situation for both teams. Because remember, the Bengals were a part of that as well. Obviously, not an easy thing to go through, regardless of whether he's your teammate or not. So I expect it to be an emotional night. I expect it to be poignant. And one more time, I couldn't be happier for Damar Hamlin that most of this conversation here in November centers around football. When you do get to the actual matchup, I think it goes without saying this is about as scintillating a game as you could expect. I don't think Bills Bengals is on the level of Bengals Chiefs. They haven't played enough for all of that. But this was a playoff matchup last year, and the Bengals took it to the Bills in their stadium. Bills were the higher seeded team. I have a feeling Buffalo feels some type of way about that. You know, the Bills were the toast of this conference outside of the Chiefs for so long. And in a lot of ways, it feels like the Bengals showed up and kind of took their shine. I would imagine the Bills would like to get some of that back. And oh boy, what timing, because Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense appears to be back. Been waiting on it. We know Joe dealt with the calf, but if last week's win against San Francisco is any indicator, this is the team that showed up and has taken the AFC by storm over the last couple of years. Burrow looks like his old, mobile, confident self, the guy that can buy time in the pocket, the guy that can shrug off sacks in the pocket and still complete throws. Jamar Chase, it was a slow couple of weeks to start, but he is back to looking like one of the absolute best receivers in football. I think one side of this matchup feels perfectly clear to me, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but when you look at the injuries that the Bills have suffered on their defense, particularly Matt Milano out, Tre'Davious White out, the Bills have dropped back to the pack defensively. They were playing some dominant football over the first 3-4 weeks of the season. They're still not bad, but you can see a definitive drop off. And I think a lot of that is because of who they've lost. I also think that's why they traded for Green Bay cornerback Rasul Douglas during the week. Did you see the Bills give him the injury designation of just got here? First of all, quality work by the Bills PR team, but he's been there for at least a few days now. I would expect him to be active for this game. I would expect him to have at least some type of role, but still, the Bills are 28th in defensive DVOA over the last month. Meanwhile, the Bengals have rocketed up all of the metrics on offense. They've been playing well 2 out of the last 3 weeks. And again, the coup de grace, if you will, against San Francisco. I trust the Cincinnati Bengals to score 24 or more points in this game. The matchup I want to watch, I think the thing that will decide this game is just how Josh Allen, Bills offensive coordinator, and Ken Dorsey, how those guys deal with whatever Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo is going to bring. And I don't say Lou Anarumo to discount the Bengals' talent. I don't think the Bengals get enough credit for how many dogs they have on defense. But Lou Anarumo at this point is almost on that Bill Belichick level of the guy that you know is going to take away what you do best, the guy that's going to make you play left-handed or tie one hand behind your back, whatever. Bengals have a scary knack for doing that. Over the last month, Cincinnati's defense allowing 16 points per game. That includes just 17 to San Francisco the other day. And I actually looked this up. Obviously, playing in the AFC and specifically the AFC North, Lou Anarumo's defenses have the dubious distinction of going up against some of the real heavyweights in this league, whether it's Lamar Jackson being in his division, Patrick Mahomes, which we know has become a pretty nice little rivalry in the AFC, and even Josh Allen, who he's had to play twice as the Bengals defensive coordinator. Over his last 8 games against those 3 guys, Lou Anarumo's defenses have only given up one 300-yard passing performance. That was to Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs a couple years ago, averaging 252 yards a game, 63 completion percentage, and again, allowing 16 points per game over the last month or so of the season. I'm confident he's going to have a plan for Josh Allen. And what do we always say about the Buffalo Bills is, as good as Josh Allen is, it all tends to start and stop with him. I will give the Bills this credit. They looked about as diverse, multiple, scary, whatever word you want to use. They looked about as good as possible in their last outing against Tampa Bay. Remember, the injury to Dawson Knox forced them to go into a lot more 11 personnel. They ran 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 76% of the time against Tampa Bay, and they absolutely blew up. I wonder if that wrinkle is going to be something that they stick with here, even though Quentin Morris, their backup tight end, is available for this game. And I wonder what Lou Anarumo does about that. Again, it's the chess match of how you play it. You saw he had a fantastic plan for Brock Purdy. They clogged the middle of the field. They confused the young quarterback. Josh Allen, a little bit easier to confuse, but I do think the Bengals have a wonderful front that should be able to create pressure without bringing a ton of blitzes. I would imagine the throwing lanes are going to be pretty clogged up. And I just think that this is going to be a hell of a challenge for the Buffalo Bills. Fortunately for us, the viewers, this doesn't seem like a game where injury is going to be a huge factor, at least not going in. Trey Hendrickson, the very, very underrated Bengals defensive end, he was back at practice Thursday. He had a foot injury last week. I would imagine he's going to play. Orlando Brown Jr., Bengals left tackle, dealing with a groin injury. I would expect he's going to play. Josh Allen, dealing with a shoulder injury, but he's already clarified as if there was any doubt he will be playing in this game. I think he said if the game was today, I'd be in. I get it. Looks like all of the primary pieces are ready to go. And this should just be a great measuring stick opportunity. I know we say that a lot, but you think about the struggles the Bills have had over the last 3 or 4 weeks. A win here goes to show you that those problems are temporary. You can still beat a quality team. And the Bengals, for the slow start to the season that they had, even with the Bills' struggles, beating this team, overcoming a guy in the MVP conversation like Josh Allen. I think we know about Joey B and Jamar Chase, like I just said, but getting a win against that offense just further cements how highly we should think of Lou Anarumo and his defense and how seriously we should take the Bengals as a contender, even if we thought otherwise at the start of the season. In the early window in Baltimore, an upstart NFC playoff contender heads to face the Baltimore Ravens and show the league that they're for real. Wait, didn't we just do this like 2 weeks ago? Oh yeah, that was the Lions, and they got smacked down 38-6 by the Ravens. It's the Seahawks' turn this time. Feels very, very similar. The sneaky playoff contender. Maybe we shouldn't call the Seahawks sneaky anymore. They're on top of the NFC West, but how much different might we feel about them if they can topple the Baltimore Ravens? And conversely, if the Ravens can beat down another NFC contender, what does that say about how highly we should think of them? I think that's the headline. Storyline for me, for all of the attention paid to these offenses, I can't wait to see what these defenses do to counteract them. You should know by now how good the Ravens defense is. We talk about it on this show. They're at the top of all of the metrics. They have a historical DVOA apparently, which is pretty incredible because people have been keeping track of that for a lot longer than you might think. But for all the attention that we might pay to Seattle's offense, defense is allowing just 12.5 points per game since week 3. Remember, they won a thriller against Detroit in overtime. And since that game, all the way back in week 2, they've only allowed 20 points to one opponent. Weirdly enough, the Andy Dalton Panthers put up 27 on them, and everybody else has been struggling to even get to 20. Even the game that they lost to Cincinnati, the Bengals only managed 17. So what gives? Which defense plays better? We know all about the Ravens and what they do under Mike McDonald, but Seattle with this young, fun secondary, they traded for Leonard Williams. What role might he have? What impact might he make moving forward? I'm not ready to compare the Seahawks to some of their predecessors on defense, but this is a fun, talented unit. And if there's anybody equipped to give Lamar Jackson fits, maybe it's these guys, maybe even more so than the Detroit Lions a couple weeks ago. The matchup I want to watch, that would be the Ravens front or the Ravens front seven, the Ravens pass rush against Seattle's offensive line. How do you handle the way Baltimore pressures you? Might be the first time all season that Seattle has gone into consecutive games with the same starting 5 on the offensive line. Check this out. Seahawks have used 30 different players on offense. That's tied for the second most in the NFL. And their most common lineup has only been used 2.1% of the time. These guys, in addition to shuffling personnel for schematics, these guys have dealt with a rash of injuries. Left guard Damian Lewis, center Evan Brown are pretty much the only members of their offensive line who haven't missed extended time. Charles Cross, the left tackle, Abe Lucas, the right tackle, have both missed a ton of games. Cross is back now, but this offensive line has had next to no consistency. Maybe this is the start of some consistency for them. Most of Seattle's offensive line depth, either rookie draft picks or guys that they signed off of other people's practice squads. It's remarkable how well they've played with this little consistency on the front 5. You hear plenty of football coaches say the biggest correlation to success is how comfortable your 5 blockers are with each other. Has not been the case in Seattle. Hasn't kept them from a 5-2 start. But here come the Baltimore Ravens. They lead the league in sacks. They're top in defensive DVOA. Like I said, they're near the top of the league in defensive EPA, success rate. All the categories that the nerds say are important, the Ravens are great at it. And the most interesting thing for me, we've talked before, they don't have a premier edge rusher. Yes, I know Jadeveon Clowney is there. I think we stopped calling him a premier edge rusher like 5 years ago. Kyle Van Noy, all due respect to him, had a very nice career, but this ain't Myles Garrett or TJ Watt we're talking about. That's the fun part. Mike McDonald loves to get pressure from a variety of different places. The Ravens DBs and linebackers, true off-ball linebackers. I'm not talking about David Ajabo or Odafe Owe, like those guys. No. Off-ball linebackers and DBs have 36 combined pressures and 12 combined sacks for Baltimore this year. So you never know where the pressure is going to come from. You never know who's going to get sent on a blitz or get sent to draw some pressure. Can't wait to see how the Seattle offensive line deals with it. I'm sure they're not looking forward to it, but they have been up to a lot of challenges so far this season. I think that is a fun little chess match in what hopefully is a much more fun trip for an NFC team to Baltimore than what we saw a couple weeks ago. It's not quite the frozen tundra yet, but up at a chilly Lambeau Field, the Green Bay Packers are hosting the LA Rams this weekend. Two teams that are at a crossroads. One team that isn't sure who's playing quarterback for them. I had a chance to catch up with the guy who's calling the game. Daryl Moose Johnston joined me to talk Packers Rams. Check that out. All right, Daryl, my first impression from this Rams trip up to Green Bay is that the Rams seem like a team that could use a bye week in the worst way. And ironically, they get it after this. So they've got to do one more game before they get that week off. Matthew Stafford hasn't practiced yet this week. I know if he can't go, he can't go. But I am curious, in a situation like this, with such an important position, your quarterback, and again, you've got the bye week right there. If it's even a question, does this feel like a situation where you maybe have to protect your quarterback from himself and say, hey, you'll get some extra time off? Maybe we go with Brett Rippon for this game?
I think that's a great point. I just watching the way that Matthew Stafford plays the game, he's one of those guys you're going to have to protect from himself. When it comes to injuries, he's always going to feel as though he can play. I'll never forget that clip, from when he was in Detroit and he's got the separated non-throwing shoulder and he's still out there playing. And the one guy comes up and he's about ready to, hit him over the top of the shoulder. He's like, no. He's been a warrior. And I think it's a part of his game that people aren't aware of. I just think his personality doesn't kind of correlate with that kind of warrior mentality from the quarterback position. So I think everybody goes into this with the best interest of the player in mind, but I definitely think you bring up a great point. I think that Sean McVay may have to protect Matthew. I think he'll be involved in that conversation in the decision. But when you've got an opportunity to really get, kind of 2 weeks of healing started in that process, and if there isn't a fracture and there's no, severe ligament damage, if it's really just a sprain with some swelling that you're working through, that extra time would prove to be very valuable on the backside. And now it's just how confident you feel with Brett Rippon going in and playing that game and trying to get a win before you go into your bye. You want to make sure you've got that victory. You don't want to go in, with a 3-game losing streak, into your bye. That's just it's not a good feel for anybody in the organization.
That was another thing I wanted to get to, and I think it pertains to both of these teams, really. I mean, even we all get it. Green Bay was bound to be in for a transitional year without Aaron Rodgers, but that's still a franchise in Green Bay that's been used to competing and contending for the better part of 3 decades at this point. And the Rams have been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. But it looks awfully dicey for the team that loses this game. It's not a place that either franchise has been comfortable being over the last, for Green Bay forever, but even over the last 5-6 years. What do you think that does to the mood of an organization where you're sitting there thinking, hey, this could be uncharted territory if this weekend doesn't go the way we want it to?
Well, I just think because of the circumstances coming into the season that you've got a little bit, you don't want to admit to it. You don't want that vibe to be out there, in your locker room around your team. But when you decide to move on from Aaron Rodgers, you're going to have some growing pains, regardless of the fact that you anticipated this at some point by drafting Jordan Love and prepping him over the last 3 seasons to get ready to take over when that day comes. And that's always going to be a bumpy ride. It's not the easiest thing in the world, especially when you've got a very young supporting cast around you. So, this team is going to learn and grow together moving forward. I think maybe the challenging part for Green Bay right now is it started off well, and then it's kind of been a gradual decline, over the last 5-6 weeks. So, that's been, a tough part for them. For the Rams, this is still unwinding from that, hey, we're pushing all of our chips to the center of the table. We're taking a shot at the Super Bowl. We'll deal with the challenges, that lie ahead in the future when those get here. And we had them earlier in the year against Pittsburgh, and they called it a competitive rebuild, kind of coming into the season. And I think everybody on the staff saw that, the rookie class was going to be very good and be able to contribute. There were some good pieces in place that had grown, over the last couple of seasons. So I think that there was a different look at it. But, when you lose Matthew Stafford, I think that's one of the hard things that's going on right now for the Rams, because I think that there was kind of a positive feeling going into that Pittsburgh game And then since that time, to lose that Pittsburgh game the way they did, I mean, they had it in hand. The crazy situation at the end with the play that was unable to be challenged. Then you go to Dallas, and the wheels just absolutely come off. I've been a part of a game where you play 5 minutes of really, really bad football, and you just can't ever dig yourself out of that hole. So for them to lose again now against Green Bay going into that bye week, I think that would kind of bring back a little bit of that thought process of what our expectations could be for this year, kind of going through that competitive rebuild.
It is amazing how everybody says it's a week-to-week league, and you're so right. Like a week ago, the Rams are, or even a week ago, the Rams are, hey, maybe this is a sneaky wild card team, and now we're talking about kind of holding the rope until you can get to the bye week. There's another thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned. This is the youngest offense in the league in Green Bay, regardless of Jordan Love, the offensive line, the skill position. It seems like there's a lot of debate up there right now about who's at fault for the poor play on offense. Is it Jordan Love? Is it the supporting cast? Is it the head coach? I'm curious, as somebody that's been around the game as long as you have, when you watch the Packers, can you even get a fair evaluation of Jordan Love right now with the youth and the mistakes that they're seeing on offense right now?
Well, they should have that evaluation already done, right? He's been around them for 3 years. So, I mean, who Jordan Love is. Now it's his opportunity to go out and play. And when you create the NFL's youngest offense and choose to surround him that way, you're going to have some growing pains. It's always hard for a group to learn how to win together. And it's a process that everybody goes through when you go through transition. And that's exactly what Green Bay is going through right now. I think that you've seen some of the comments coming out. The one thing you don't want to see is repeated mistakes. I don't know how many of those Jordan Love has had. I think one of the consistent things that we're seeing is a little bit of a struggle with the deep ball. The chemistry between the receivers and him as a quarterback. So, there's a few things there that I would just say is the process of a group growing and learning together. We were very young in Dallas, and things didn't start out well for us. We were the youngest team in the NFL when we won our first Super Bowl, but there was a lot of growing pains getting to that spot. So this is to be expected. So I don't think that this is anything negative on the development of Jordan Love. I think the Green Bay, when you're around a guy day in, day out, even though he's not playing, you get to know who he is as a man. And you evaluated him as a player coming out of college, so you kind of know the talent. You're pretty sure you've got what you wanted. So I think they should be fine in what their evaluation is with Jordan Love as their quarterback moving forward. Now it's just an understanding of a young skill group, young supporting cast around him, and an offensive line that's really struggled. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. When you lose David Bakhtiari, in the first game of the season, it's not going to be good. And we've seen that in Cleveland with Jack Conklin. We've seen that in Seattle with Abe Lucas. You go into that season, and in week one, your best tackle goes down for the year. That's a tough one to dig out of, especially when you've got a lot of young guys that you're counting on to kind of help this offense grow and develop.
I know he doesn't play on offense, but it still seems noteworthy that during the week, Green Bay traded away Rasul Douglas. All the word coming out of Green Bay, this is a beloved veteran. This is a locker room guy. I understand that's the nature of the business, and getting a 3rd round pick seems like a perfectly fair return to me. But I'm curious, from the player side of this, you talk about a young team learning how to grow and win. How do you compartmentalize that when you lose a guy that clearly seems to be very important in that locker room?
Yeah, this is a lot different than when I played. It's something that, I played half of my career under the old business style, and I played the second half of my career with free agency in place. People were still not really aggressive with trades. When we came down to the trade deadline, there wasn't a lot of activity. A lot of that stuff was still done, in the offseason leading up to the beginning of the season, kind of the way things were done under the old model. So even though we were moving to the free agency component, a lot of the business transactions were still happening the way they happened under the previous way of business. So, fortunately for me, I never really had to go through the process of losing not only a teammate, but a guy that you had become very close to. And, just to see, Keyshawn Nixon and his response to losing, not just a teammate, but a good friend, a guy that you counted on away from the building. Those are things that I didn't have to deal with in my career. So I think it's very challenging. And as you point out, this is a secondary, with Jair Alexander in the back issues. There's some youth there. Eric Stokes is on IR. There's just some things in the secondary that aren't settled. And it seemed like the one consistent thing that you saw on film was Rasul Douglas. So, the organization felt it was in the best interest moving forward and making that deal. And I think you heard, some comments from the front office. They came to us a couple of days prior. We didn't feel there was fair value there with the initial offer, but when they came back and it changed the terms, we felt it was in our best interest, something that we couldn't turn down to help us get better moving forward. So that's kind of going through this process of learning how to win during transition that has a lot of bumps in the road, and they're feeling it on the defensive side of the ball just as well.
One last one for you. I know your Cowboy teams were good enough that all your playoff battles against Green Bay happened at home, but I am curious if you, and honestly, even as a broadcaster, player, broadcaster, whatever, if you would just have any special memories of Lambeau Field or what you think about when you get to go up there.
Oh, Lambeau's one of the places that you have to go to. I mean, if you're a football player in the NFL, I mean, it's the Mecca. So there's just so much tradition, and my dad was a huge Packer fan growing up, so I've got that influence as well. So for me, my rookie year, we played up there. I think I had my longest play, that might have been Kansas City. I got to play in Arrowhead and Lambeau, my rookie year. So, two of the best places you can play in the NFL. And then to your point, it was one of those weird schedule things where we didn't get back to Lambeau for a long time. I think the next time we were going to have an opportunity to play there, I was out for the season with my neck injury. And I actually went up on the trip and I worked with our equipment guys and went over with them early in the morning and got to meet Red on the Green Bay side, and just to see how hard those guys work leading up to the game. We come from the hotel on the bus and we walk in and the locker room's all set up and everything's exactly how it is. There's a lot of time and energy and effort that goes into that. And I got to experience that firsthand. I mean, we got there at 5 o'clock in the morning and worked nonstop up until the first guys were walking in at about 8:45. So, that was eye-opening for me from, respect that I had for our support staff when you talk about the equipment guys. But that's how much it meant to me, to want to be able to go back to Lambeau and just, being in that environment and, just the way the fans are and now the way that stadium has grown and everything they've added to it. It's awesome. And we had an opportunity to visit, with, the Rams people that we wanted to talk to today leading up to the game. And, we had a chance to talk to Brett Rippon and he's excited to play. He's been there before. This will be, I think, the second time he's been there. Didn't get a chance to play last time. He was just on the sideline and still loved it. Just loved the atmosphere. And I think everybody who has an opportunity, as the visiting team coming into Lambeau, there's just so much respect for, what that organization means to the NFL, what that stadium means to the NFL. So I tell everybody, if you get a chance to go to Lambeau Field and enjoy a game, please do, and go at a time when it's maybe not your team and you can just enjoy the environment and really have a good time where you're not going on that emotional roller coaster if your team's not having a great day.
I've been fortunate enough to go a few times, but now I'm trying to catch a flight and get back, maybe get a beer brought. I think you summed it up perfectly. I hope the game is a great one, Daryl. I appreciate the time. Thanks.
Yeah, you got it. Looking forward to it.
Ooh, we have covered a lot of ground today, but there's still more to get to. There's still 8 matchups on the docket. Don't you worry. We are going to get you ready for every single game in the NFL in Week 9. This is the part of the show. You know the drill. Before we get you out of here, it's the hurry up offense. Not going to give you 10 minutes on every single matchup. We'd all be here all day. But before we get out of here, I'm going to give you a little nugget, something interesting, something fun about every matchup left on the schedule. All 8 of them. My wonderful producers, they're going to give me 3.5 minutes right here. I'm going to try to get you out of here, get you on with your weekend as quickly, as efficiently as possible. So let's start this thing off with the Minnesota Vikings at the Atlanta Falcons starting now. Who doesn't want to see a rematch of the 1998 NFC Championship game? Apologies, Vikings fans. I felt like I had to. I'm sorry for bringing that up. It's a battle of the backups. Feels like a theme for the NFL right now. Jaren Hall looking like he's going to make his first NFL start for Minnesota. Josh Dobbs is there, not quite ready to go yet, according to Kevin O'Connell, the head coach. I'm going with Taylor Heineke. He replaces Desmond Ridder. Taylor Heineke's taking a team to the NFL playoffs. I'm going to lean with the guy with experience playing at home, but can't wait for this moment for Jaren Hall. Should be a ton of fun. Bears at Saints. Big line. 8.5 points for the New Orleans Saints, and I understand why. Shine kind of faded from Tyson Bagent's glass slipper when he was in Las Vegas. I'm guessing it's not going to be a whole lot different in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Not sure if Saints head coach Dennis Allen is a good head coach. I do think he's a hell of a defensive coordinator, a hell of a defensive coach. I think a very veteran Saints defense is going to make life very difficult on Tyson Bagent. Commanders at Patriots. I don't know what to say other than that the vibes are just really, I don't know. The vibes don't feel great here. I think I like Washington's boom or bust offense more than I like New England's grab bag, whatever they got going on there. We'll see what happens. My guess is it's not going to be super pretty. Buccaneers at Texans. Seen CJ Stroud take advantage of better defenses than Tampa's. I know that. But the loss to Carolina, it's a reminder that this league will humble you. I like this Bucs team. You can criticize Baker Mayfield all you want. I think they've got the right pieces. I admire the way they came back against Buffalo the other night. If Tampa doesn't win, I think they at least cover the 3-point spread. Maybe I'm wrong. I refuse to write the Bucs out of the NFC South race until I have to. Cardinals at Browns. Looks like Clayton Tune is going to start for Arizona. That's really all I need to know. I like Clayton Tune coming out of the University of Houston, but this is the league's best defense in your first start at the dog pound. I don't like it at all. Not a good spot to be in for Clayton Tune. Colts at Panthers. Glad the Panthers got off the losing streak. They're still not a good team. The Colts are a very mediocre team. Not usually a great place to be, but in this case, I think it is. I'll take Gardner Minshew in this one. Giants at Raiders. Here's a fun fact for you. The Raiders opened as 3.5-point favorites against the New York Giants. Then they fired their head coach and their general manager. And then they benched their starting quarterback in favor of a rookie. And they're still 2-point favorites. That's how much the line moved. That's how much Vegas and bettors think about the New York Giants heading into this matchup. I can't say I blame them. Maybe we'll see Tommy DeVito in this game. I'm not sure, but it's a season from hell for the New York Giants. And at home, I think I'll take the Las Vegas Raiders. Chargers at Jets, wrapping this thing up on Monday night. Do you realize this is the third time in 4 weeks the Chargers have played a standalone primetime football game? It's true. Strange, but true. What's even stranger is that last week was shockingly drama-free. They just kind of dispatched Tyson Bagent and the Bears. That's how I know, win or lose, something stupid's going to happen Monday night at MetLife Stadium. Of course it will. The Jets are involved. The Chargers are there. We're all going to have to watch it. Give me the wackiest outcome possible. I'll probably regret it, but I'll take the Chargers to cover the very small spread. I got in under the clock today. That's what happens when we have bye weeks. That's how it's supposed to work. Some teams are supposed to take some time off, and I don't have to do 11 or 12 of these things in 3.5 minutes. I hope it's like that every week. That does it for the show. It's going to be a wonderful week 9 of NFL action. I feel like I say this every week, but I think this is as excited as I've been. I hope that just keeps happening. That's how it works, right? As the drama escalates. I'm rambling. That does it for our show. We will be here Monday to break it all down for you, to recap the action, to get you ready for the Chargers on Monday night. Go find us on Spotify. Go find us on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. However you get your podcasts, however you digest your NFL content, we'll be there for you. We appreciate it. I will see y'all on Monday.